Hi there, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Karen Fabian, and I'm so glad you're here. I know you've got limited time, so thanks for spending some of it with me. Whether you're a brand new yoga teacher, currently in training, or you've been teaching for years, this podcast is for you. My goal is to help you feel like teaching can be easy, fun, and a natural extension of who you are, rather than something you have to do the right way, whatever that is, or something that feels like you have to work hard at it all the time. This isn't a podcast where I'll be telling you what to do or critiquing your teaching. Instead, I'll share frameworks, skills, and techniques you can experiment with to see what works for you, especially when it comes to understanding anatomy, cueing, and sequencing. I'll share ideas that may challenge what you believe about what it takes to be a yoga teacher. All I ask is that you keep an open mind, because some of what I share may sound different from what you've heard. We'll also talk about the mindset of a confident teacher, not only because it's such a big part of empowered teaching, but because it's rarely discussed. With that, welcome, and let's get into today's conversation. Hi there. Welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, and this is episode 409. I'm recording this on June 18th, 2026, and this will be posted on June 22nd, 2026. And I've got a couple of themes that I want to share with you today. And if you stick around until the end, you'll also hear, excuse me, you'll also hear towards the end, I pivot into a different theme around teaching. And if you're feeling a little frustrated teaching your classes right now, you're definitely going to want to stick around for that. This will be a pretty short episode, but I feel, I guess, compelled to start with a couple of things that have been happening in my world lately. And I'm going to kind of make some conclusions that will allow us to pivot into a particular topic that might be, I don't know, it might be impactful for you to hear. So let me just start out by sharing, if you listen to last week's episode, I talked about what happens when you let go of outcomes. And I talked about it in the context of something that I was getting frustrated with inside my business, but it's a broad topic. I mean, certainly when we look at yoga, we can look at many themes of non-attachment that are fundamental in Buddhism. And non-attachment at its core is about letting go of outcomes. So this is a yogic theme, but it's also a theme of personal growth. It's also a theme of business. It's a theme of even relationships. I mean, it can be applied in so many different ways. And I knew when I recorded that episode, it was one of the few episodes that after I recorded it, I had a doubting voice in my mind that it was too raw to post. But I said to myself, and that part of me, I'm not going to edit that because this is my podcast and it might not be for everybody. It might not be even an episode for everybody, but that's okay. This is a space for me to share authentically, and it really doesn't matter if you like it or not. I mean, I'm just being honest with you here. It's about, in part, me sharing authentically, but of course, there is a part about sharing lessons. If you've been listening for any period of time, I use this platform to teach, to inform, to uplift, to educate. So absolutely there's a theme, or there are themes of that as well. But at its heart, this is my sandbox. And when I recorded that episode and before it was posted, had that doubt, I said to myself, I don't want to go back and edit that because it's authentic to me. And I let it out into the universe. And the interesting thing was, I had a lot of comments from people, and I typically don't. And every comment I got, was positive. They were basically saying, I hear what you're saying. I hear your frustration. I don't want to go into all the details. If you didn't listen to the episode, you can go back and listen to it. It's the one right before this, so 408. But, everybody that sent me an email or a DM was really, I don't want to say supportive. I mean, yes, they were supportive, but they were basically saying, hey, I listened and in so many words, they were saying, I can feel your frustration. And here's a little bit of what I was thinking when I was listening. There were a very small number of people, and I don't want to necessarily say how many, but it was really small, who wrote to me in some way or another and said, I didn't like it. I felt like, it was an inappropriate message in so many words for you to be sending. And I don't know, I can't even imagine sending something like that to a person who's sharing authentically. I mean, I just, it's like, I know in today times there is this culture of giving feedback, of sharing Yelp reviews, of, kind of giving opinions. And everybody's entitled to their opinion. But I think this is one of the central things that yoga teachers struggle with. They struggle with attachment to outcome as it relates to what other people think of them when they're teaching their classes. And here on my podcast, this is another way for me to be teaching. And I don't have any attachment to how you absorb this, right? Like, this is my authentic way to share. And so I just found that whole process of last week's episode to be really impactful to me. And it really was an opportunity for me to stand behind my words, stand behind my feelings, regardless of outcome. But for the most part, the outcome was really positive and it was received really well. Now, the other aspect of this that I wanted to speak on, which is sort of related, and it's kind of interesting to me how it happened so shortly after that episode being released. I don't know if you saw my post on Sunday. So that would have been Sunday, June 14th. I spontaneously posted a video on TikTok and Instagram, and it was basically me in my car in my bathing suit talking about how I had just come from the pool. I had swum a bunch of laps. I was feeling really good in my body. I had taken a selfie at the pool to send to Ben, like, hey, I'm at the pool. I'm having such a great time. And then I looked at the selfie, and my first thought was, who is that older woman? Like, I saw my gray hair, I saw the wrinkles around my eyes. I thought, wow, I really look like my mom, who I love my mom, and my mom is beautiful, and she's in her 80s, and I'm so grateful that I still, can still spend time with her. It was just feeling like I could see my mother in her 80s in my face was just striking to me. And so the point of the video was me saying I had this experience and I had this dichotomy of how I felt in my body and how I looked in the picture, and this dissonance between the somatic experience I was having of feeling really cool and inspired and energized, and then this just emotional downturn of looking at my picture and feeling old and feeling gray and feeling wrinkled. And when I posted it, I had no attachment to results, no attachment to outcome. And within 12 hours, it had almost 50,000 views just on the one channel, TikTok. And then on my Instagram, it had thousands of views. And not only that, hundreds of comments, hundreds of likes. I think as of today, so today is Thursday, I posted this Sunday, it's over 100,000 views between the two platforms and hundreds of comments. And that doesn't even count on Facebook. When I go on my Facebook page, I have hundreds of views, hundreds of comments, and I've been reading every one and responding to most of them. Some of them are actually, interestingly, pretty negative to me. Like in the video, I comment that I'm 61, and there were two or three people, one was a man and two were women, who said, "You look older than 61." And I don't know if they were bots, but I was just struck by who would actually write that. But when you're out there in the social media world, you need to expect anything. People will write anything. But the reason I wanted to share this with you is because if I had posted that in a way that was trying to elicit a particular response, it would have felt performative. But the fact was, I had no attachment to result. I just wanted to share this experience. And I think somehow, in that most authentic of ways of expressing, people saw that there was no performative nature to this post. And the other interesting thing was, I was speaking about an experience I was having on an emotional level, on a somatic level, and it resonated with people. And so I found that to be such an interesting scenario, situation, and one that I totally was not prepared for. And what it's led me on is this new sort of adjacent path to the content I've been posting, to explore issues of aging, issues of mindset, issues of confidence, issues around women feeling this dissonance between how they feel on the inside and the judgments they make of themselves when they look at themselves in the mirror. I had women who were saying in the comments things like, when I go to get my hair cut and the stylist whips me around in the chair to look at myself in the mirror, I feel awful. Even though I felt good going to the salon and I felt good getting my hair cut, but then I saw my face in the mirror and I felt awful. I had women tell me, I never take pictures anymore. I never look in the mirror. I never watch myself in the reflection of the stuff on the street when I'm walking by. I don't let my kids take pictures of me. Like, so many things. And so I've just been kind of exploring these topics in my social media, even though the business part of me in my head is saying, why are you going down this path? This has nothing to do with helping yoga teachers. But the majority of yoga teachers that I work with are women. And I would bet globally, when you look at yoga as an industry, the majority of teachers are women. So these are issues that I'm talking about that affect and impact women. So it is closely adjacent. But my point in sharing this with you is that I didn't get hung up, and I haven't been hung up on, well, what about the business aspect of this? I've just been going with it. And that is definitely not like me. Just like letting go of outcomes and the things I talked about in last week's episode, that's really not like me either. And that took a really intentional choice for me to say, I'm not going to worry about the outcomes. And even when I got a couple of nasty comments on my social media about my looks and how I look for my age, and even when I got a really, really, really small number of people writing to me about last week's episode saying they didn't like it and giving me advice, I didn't, it didn't affect me. I just kind of said, hey, everybody can have an opinion. It's not going to affect me. It's not going to change what I do. So, my question for you is, what's something that you really want to do, or you really want to say, maybe in your classes, or you really want to take on as a goal, but you're worried about the outcome? Because I can certainly say, when I was teaching as a newer teacher, there were a lot of things I wanted to say in my classes, but I had that inner voice that said, don't say that. They're not going to get it, or they're going to judge you, or that's inappropriate. I mean, I don't mean inappropriate like I was going to say something inappropriate, but there's some things where maybe you want to share a particular story, or you want to share something from the heart, and that inner voice says, oh, don't do that. And you feel like you're going to go out on this limb and you're going to fall off this limb and nobody's going to catch you. And so I wanted to take this conversation we're having now into that direction of what's something you really want to do, or you really want to say, or you really want to take on as a goal, but you're worried about the outcome. So I'm just going to throw out a couple of ideas and you can see if any of these ideas resonate with you. The first one is starting a social media feed that's dedicated to you as a yoga teacher. I have a lot of people tell me they wish they could do it, but they don't know what to say. I always hear from people who want to start a social media channel. There's so many yoga teachers out there. Who am I to start? Or it's already a saturated market. And I want you to see that is just the response from your inner critic. That is not the truth. That is not the reality. There's nothing stopping you except that inner critic who's trying to hold you down. So maybe that's something. Maybe you want to open a studio. Maybe you want to start or end your class with some kind of, I'll call it a Dharma talk for lack of a better phrase. I actually never used the words Dharma talk or the phrase Dharma talk when I was coming up as a teacher. But it is a phrase I've heard from other yoga teachers, and I think you know what that means. It's kind of like when you go to a class and the teacher opens the class with some sort of, not really meditation, but some sort of speaking from the heart, or maybe speaking to a yogic theme, but it's really coming from their knowledge base. It's not like they're sitting there reading from a book, or certainly at the end of class when people are in Shavasana, not really a Dharma talk, but maybe just speaking from the heart, like maybe saying, as you're here, what comes to your mind? Can you let go of any resistance you have in your body? Like just allowing, a lot of times when I do that at the end of class, I'm just sort of having kind of a riff with myself and just kind of letting these thoughts come through. And maybe that's something you want to do, but there's a voice in your head saying, "Oh, who are you to be doing that? Who are you? Who do you think you are to say, anything about growth or personal growth or yogic themes or themes around spirituality or even just speaking from your own truth?" A lot of yoga teachers, a lot of people don't feel like they have the guts to do that, right? It's always easier to just criticize people. It's always easier to just be like, "Oh, you should do that," or "Who are you to say that?" It's always easier to do that. It's a lot harder to actually stand for something, to actually say what's on your mind, to actually put yourself out there. Right. And so I totally get it if you feel like these are things you want to do, or this particular thing I'm talking about, speaking more from the heart, is something you want to do and you're afraid, because I've been there. I have absolutely been there. Maybe you want to pursue a particular teaching gig and you're worried about doing it, or you're nervous about doing it, or you don't think you're qualified. Maybe you want to write a book. Maybe you want to start a Substack. I don't really know much about that model or that platform, but that's really big these days. Maybe you want to start a YouTube channel, which from a social media perspective is a little bit different than the other stuff, the Instagrams, the TikToks. So all I would say is whatever comes up for you when you hear about this idea of what's something you really want to do or say in your classes or take on as a goal, but you're worried about the outcome. Whatever comes to you, just ask yourself, what is the first step I can take to get this started? Just identify that. What's the first step? Because that's all you need is what is the first step and to do the first step. Because once you do the first step, then the second step happens, and then the third step happens. And then you start to create what I call the magic of momentum. And once you create the magic of momentum, the ball is rolling downhill. You have gone through the inertia phase and you're starting to actually build momentum. And now you're moving in the direction of where you want to go. So I wanted to speak to that as a piggyback off of the themes from last week's episodes, kind of the interesting experiences I've been having this week as I've been exploring these themes that have come from that one post I made on Sunday, and today's Thursday. But the last thing I wanted to do is, I'm running a Facebook ad, which I haven't run a Facebook ad in, I think, a year at this point. And whenever I run a Facebook ad, I basically create a really simple ad that people obviously will see, and the ad's targeted to yoga teachers. And it's really just an ad that talks about, if you're having trouble creating your sequence, here's a resource that can help, and it's my sequence building template. And so when people download that template from the ad, they get brought to a thank you page. Um, and it basically describes a particular scenario that teachers experience a lot. And it says, if this scenario sounds like you, just reply back, that's me. And I'll give you some tips on how to get the ball rolling. And I've gotten quite a few comments, that's me, over the past couple of days. The ad's only been running for about a week and a half. And so I wanted to share a little bit about that's me piece with you to see if maybe it's you too. So this idea is around, do you see yourself in a particular scenario? And I'm going to give you a kind of a short list here. A teacher who spends a lot of time prepping for their classes, a teacher who is worried or stressed, a teacher who is stuck on her mat, even though she really wants to be able to walk around the room, or at least stand on the mat, but not practice with students primarily. A teacher who is unsure of the cues to share, a teacher who keeps forgetting their sequence. Now, there's a longer list, but let's just end there. If any of those things or all of those things are things that you can relate to, I want you to know a couple of things here about where you're at. Number one, this isn't the kind of thing that you should go at alone to try to fix. It's very difficult to fix these kinds of problems on your own, because all you'll end up doing is just overthinking in circles without moving forward, because these sorts of problems come from a couple of different things. The first one is, it's a sign that no one has actually shown you the how. Things like how to do the walk and talk, how to share clear cues, how to create a signature sequence and have the guts to stick with it versus changing it all the time, which many yoga teachers do because they don't have the guts to teach a signature sequence. And it takes guts because you have to go against the grain of what most yoga teachers are doing, which is changing it all the time. So no one has actually shown you the how. So I want you to give yourself a break to acknowledge, oh man, it's not that I'm having these problems and there's something wrong with me. It's just a really basic, fundamental lack of information on how to do this. Okay. And then the next thing is, underneath all of those things that I listed, all of those problems, is oftentimes a lack of understanding movement, because understanding movement infuses the cues, the sequencing. And I've talked about this many times, that so many yoga teachers are just not given adequate education in their 200-hour training around anatomy. And yet they expect to walk into the room and understand, when they're watching people move on the mat, how to help them. And it's really, really hard if you don't understand movement. But the solution to that is not to sit at Starbucks with an anatomy book and try to memorize things. That just doesn't work. So I wanted to point that out again, so you will give yourself a break and stop blaming yourself for not getting it. And then the last thing is teachers miss out on mindset training. And a huge part of being a confident, successful, empowered yoga teacher is what's going on between your ears. If you're tied to the outcome of wanting your students to like the class, if you're flying like a flag in the breeze, one day you're teaching this way, one day you're teaching that way, it's very difficult to feel confident. If you're triggered by beginners in your class, if you're triggered by negative feedback, if you're triggered when you go to take somebody else's class, oh my God, why am I not doing all the stuff that she's doing in her class? But all of these things require conversations and support and coaching around mindset. But when you look at the Yoga Alliance 200-hour teacher training agenda, nothing on there speaks to mindset training. But it takes guts to walk into the room and teach yoga. It takes courage to do that and to do it in a way where you're not attached to your students, where you see them as fully capable rather than seeing them as they need you to protect them. They need you to look after them. They need you to save them. And without you feeling like you need them to like you need them to like the class. Even if someone takes your class and they absolutely hate it, they still did yoga. So that box is checked. All of that lives in the mind. So I just wanted to end this episode with a piece on that. And if you're hearing any of this and you're feeling like that is me, just send me a note on Instagram. Hey, I listened to this episode and that's me. And just in the acknowledgement there, that's the first step. Remember, I said a few minutes ago, what would be the first step you would take? Well, the first step you can take right now is just to acknowledge that's me, rather than sitting in your house alone and trying to figure this out on your own. Okay. And then the last thing I'll say is don't forget to check the show notes because I am going to put a couple of links in there for some resources that you can download that you might be interested in. I'll probably include a couple things around cueing and sequencing in there. So I hope this has been helpful. Thank you so much for listening to the end, and I really appreciate you. And I'll talk to you next week on the next episode of Conversations for Yoga Teachers. Namaste. Thanks so much for listening. If this episode got you thinking about a current challenge you're having in your classes or gave you ideas that connect to how you'd like to teach, I'd love to hear from you. I know a lot of teachers try to figure things out on their own by reading books, listening to podcast episodes, geez, even mine, or watching videos on social media. And while those things can be helpful, they don't actually solve the problem. What I've seen in my work with teachers is that problem solving and breakthroughs happen when you reach out for help and get one-on-one support, not in an hours-based program, not in a group training, but in a setting where what's going on with you is the focus. If this sounds like the kind of support that would make a difference for you, send me a message on Instagram at Barebones Yoga or email me at karen@barebonesyoga.com. Just include the word podcast and tell me what's on your mind, your biggest challenge right now, or something you want to do next but aren't sure how to get started. I'll reply back with a couple of specific things you can try, and if it makes sense, we can hop on a call as well. You don't have to figure it out on your own.